Shalom, selamat pagi Bapak Ibu dan teman-teman semuanya. Boleh dong dengar suaranya, shalom semuanya. Shalom. Puji Tuhan, bersukacita sekali pada hari ini kita diperkumpulkan untuk dapat mengikuti Veritas Lecture. Saya mengundang semuanya untuk bangkit berdiri, kita mau memuji Tuhan, bersyukur atas kebaikan Tuhan. Haleluya. Kita masuk ke hadirat Tuhan dengan rasa sukacita, sebab kita memiliki Allah yang luar biasa baik sekali. Dengan hati bersyukur, masuk di hadirat-Mu, membawa pujian bagi-Mu, Yesus. Ku memandang wajah-Mu, bersuka di depan-Mu, sambil menceritakan kasih-Mu. Bersorak-sorai bagi kebaikan-Mu. Katakan Engkau baik, Engkau baik, sangat baik. Kasih setia-Mu tak pernah berubah. Engkau baik, sangat baik. Kasih setia-Mu tak pernah berubah. Bersyukur masuk di hadirat-Mu, membawa pujian bagi-Mu, Yesus. Ku memandang wajah-Mu, bersuka di depan-Mu, sambil menceritakan kasih-Mu. Ku mengangkat tangan-Mu, bersorak-sorai bagi kebaikan-Mu. Sangat baik, kasih setia-Mu tak pernah berubah. Engkau baik, sangat baik, kasih setia-Mu tak pernah. Sama-sama katakan, Engkau baik, sangat baik, kasih setia-Mu tak pernah berubah. Engkau baik, sangat baik, setia-Mu tak pernah berubah. Engkau baik, sangat baik, kasih setia-Mu tak pernah berubah. Engkau baik, sangat baik, kasih setia-Mu tak pernah berubah. Tak pernah berubah, kasih setia-Mu tak pernah berubah. Tuhan, silakan duduk kembali. Bapak, Ibu, dan teman-teman sekalian, pada Veritas Lecture hari ini kita mengundang seorang pembicara yang berperan aktif dalam menyuarakan isu-isu tentang perdagangan manusia. Beliau merupakan Luschen, seorang lulusan Texas A&M University dengan gelar Bachelor of Science di bidang ilmu gizi dan dietetika, serta minor di psikologi. Di usianya yang muda, beliau sudah memiliki berbagai pengalaman di kegiatan sosial dan kerelawanan, seperti di Yayasan Harapan Bagi Indonesia, Acts of Mercy International, December, dan lain-lain, di mana ia berkontribusi dalam edukasi masyarakat, pemberdayaan komunitas, dan bantuan krisis global. Dan puncaknya, beliau pernah menjabat sebagai Regional Direktur dari Unbound Now Global, organisasi internasional yang fokus pada pemberantasan perdagangan manusia. Tanpa berlama lagi, please welcome Ms. Luschen.
Terima kasih banyak ya. Selamat, hampir udah siang ya. Selamat siang, selamat pagi. Hari ini saya akan pakai lebih banyak bahasa Inggris dari bahasa Indo ya, Kak Bapak? Aman? Aman, oke. Tapi slides-nya dalam bahasa Indonesia. Saya sangat senang bisa berbicara tentang hal ini karena udah kerja dalam dunia ini sangat lama, udah di Indonesia hampir 8 tahun, dan hampir semua waktu di sini kerja untuk anti perdagangan manusia atau memberantas perdagangan manusia di sini. Dan sebenarnya sekarang kami lihat trend baru, bukan cuma di Indonesia tapi seluruh dunia, bernama forced cyber scamming. Jadi hari ini akan belajar tentang itu, mungkin sedikit berat, tapi semoga kalian aman. Jika merasa agak berat karena akan lihat dan mendengar beberapa cerita sedikit berat, boleh keluar jika butuh, ambil nafas, gak apa-apa sih. Jadi sedikit, ini. It works. Okay, sedikit tentang aku. So, saya dari Texas. Jadi Yeehaw. Waktu bilang itu banyak orang pikir, cowboys, ya. Ada beberapa cowboys di situ. Dan pertama kali ke Indonesia itu pada tahun 2017. Jadi udah lumayan lama tinggal di sini dan saya udah merasa sedikit seperti orang Indo, tapi cuma kulit putih. Waktu pindah ke sini, saya membantu buka kantor Unbound Now di Indonesia. Sekarang itu tutup sementara dan saya ganti ke yayasan lain, tapi masih kerja dalam dunia ini. Dan sebenarnya ini perjalanan aku nggak bikin rencana. Waktu di kuliah saya pikir akan kerja di hospital sebagai dietitian. Saya pikir akan melakukan sedikit beda, tapi Tuhan ada rencana lain. Jadi perjalananku seperti perjalanan Tuhan. Jadi mungkin kalian mendengar, she graduated in dietetics, kenapa kerja di sini? Itu karena Tuhan. Sometimes if you just have little yeses to Him, He'll take you on a journey that you never expected. And so, first, I want us to start with what is human trafficking. Apa itu perdagangan manusia? Mungkin kalian udah mendengar, saya tahu ada satu presentasi tahun kemarin ketika satu staffku ke Petra, dan mungkin kalian udah mendengar tentang perdagangan manusia. Tapi waktu banyak orang mendengar apa itu perdagangan manusia, mereka pikir, orang diculik, orang dikunci di kamar, gak boleh keluar. Tapi itu lebih besar daripada itu. Human trafficking takes many forms, but to break it down simply, there's one model, we call it the action means purpose model, or dalam bahasa Indonesia, tindakan cara tujuan. Jadi harus ada 3 unsur ini untuk situasi menjadi perdagangan manusia. Jadi harus ada tindakan, biasanya tindakan seperti merekrut, dipindah, diiklankan, seperti itu. You're being sold, you're being moved around, you were recruited by someone. And then cara atau the means itu biasanya force, fraud, or coercion, atau dipaksa, diancam, ditipu. Jadi korban, TPPO, diancam, dipaksa, atau ditipu, atau semuanya. Mungkin ditipu dalam situasi itu, atau merasa diancam, atau dipaksa melakukan sesuatu mereka nggak mau untuk tujuan. Jadi harus ada tujuan. Tujuan itu biasanya untuk kerja paksa, atau dalam bahasa English forced labor or labor trafficking, dan juga ada tujuan untuk eksploitasi seksual. Jadi ada beberapa bentuk perdagangan manusia. Ada perdagangan seks. Perdagangan seks anak itu untuk secara internasional, waktu ngomong tentang perdagangan seks anak, hukum internasional bilang untuk perdagangan seks anak gak harus ada bukti untuk cara. So you don't need to prove the means because a child is already under the age of 18. Jadi anak udah di bawah tahun 18. Jadi mereka gak bisa kasih consent. Mereka gak bisa kasih, saya selalu lupa kata consent. Persetujuan, yes, itu gak bisa kasih persetujuan. Jadi biasanya waktu ke pengadilan, ada kasus dengan perdagangan seks anak, biasanya nggak harus dibuktikan cara. Tapi Indonesia sedikit beda, tergantung hakim untuk itu. Dan juga yang paling besar di dunia dan juga paling besar untuk orang Indo, perdagangan tenaga kerja, udah juga seperti kerja paksa, forced labor you might hear, Sometimes people call it modern day slavery. Perdagangan tenaga kerja untuk bentuk Indonesia, untuk orang Indonesia, biasanya itu terlihat seperti TKI, TKW ke negara lain akan kerja sebagai pembantu di rumah, tapi sebenarnya mereka dipaksa kerja sangat lama, mungkin 20 jam, gak dapat kasur, gak dapat makan, gak dapat gaji. Kadang-kadang ada kekerasan, perkosaan di situ. Kami juga bisa lihat perdagangan tenaga kerja dalam ABK. Kalian tahu ABK? Anak buah kapal, ya. Kalian semua mungkin mendengar beberapa cerita tentang anak buah kapal. Jadi kami lihat banyak orang Indo, terutama cowok Indo, kerja di kapal. Kapal itu biasanya pemiliki oleh Taiwan, China, negara lain. Dan waktu di kapal itu mereka harus kerja 24 jam. Mereka menerima atau ada pengalaman kekerasan, diperkosakan, gak dapat gaji, kadang-kadang juga ada orang meninggal waktu di kapal itu. Jadi mereka dipaksa, diancam, ditipu. Ya, ingat itu ya, saya akan ulang itu banyak kali. They're going to be forced, frauded, or coerced into doing something, atau diancam, ditipu, atau dipaksa. Dan ada bentuk baru, forced cyber scamming. Jadi, I want to see a raise of hands for the people that are in the crowd here. Jadi, angkat tangan jika kalian udah mendengar forced cyber scamming. Anyone here? Sedikit, seperti lectures. Mahasiswa, kalian nggak baca berita or the news? Y'all don't read the news? Cuman TikTok, yeah? You only get your news on TikTok and Instagram. So there is a new trend these last couple of years. We've been seeing it affect a lot of Indonesians since 2022, 2023, but it has been growing drastically. And we'll actually talk about some of the cases here in Indonesia later. And so the basics of forced cyber scamming, it is a form of labor trafficking. So people typically are deceived into taking a job abroad. We see them take jobs in Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, Thailand. Most Indonesians are going to Myanmar and Cambodia right now. And when they get there, they think they're going to work as a customer service agent, work as an HR person, they're going to work in IT. But once they get there, they typically end up being forced to scam other people. So they are being forced into becoming scammers or into becoming criminals. And so there's this concept that we call forced criminality. And that is when a victim of human trafficking is forced to engage in illegal activity during their exploitation because they have no other option. They can't just run away, they can't just say no because their life and their survival is on the line. And so a lot of these victims that get deceived into taking these jobs abroad, they can't do anything else, so they have to scam other people. They have to take action and they have to take a part in this criminal activity. And that's where it gets really, really complicated because every country's legal system is a little different. Some countries are now recognizing forced criminality when it comes to legal proceedings. Some countries aren't. Therefore, we are now currently seeing some human trafficking victims coming out of these situations that are being arrested and they're being detained in jails because the country doesn't know what to do with them. They recognize their victims, but they also recognize they did something illegal. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we see a lot of forced criminality happen in the forced cyber scamming, which makes this a lot more complex than just ABK, TKW, ke negara lain, seperti itu. With forced cyber scamming, we see two sets of victims. And so we have the trafficking victim, the person that's forced to do the scamming, but then we also have the victim of the scam. I'm not gonna make y'all raise your hands, but I'm sure every single one of y'all has either experienced a scam personally or know a friend or a family member or someone back home that has experienced a scam. I have family members that have reached out. They've, in America, have experienced scams. It's, I think, an everyday thing nowadays. I think we can agree. Everyone has maybe been texted on way, oh, mau kerja di sini, ayo dapat gaji cepat, gak harus kerja banyak, ya, oh, gaji luar biasa. I think we all have gotten scams. We've all probably even received WhatsApps from like fake bank profiles about different stuff. And so the thing about forced cyber scamming is it's
causing more issues than normal human trafficking. It's creating more victims than we see on both ends. As well as the perpetrators are pretty ruthless. We're seeing the traffickers and the people in charge of these rings, they're part of gangs. They're part of these multinational gangs that have already dealt with illegal gambling, money smuggling, drug rings, arms rings, and so they're ruthless. They are constantly updating their tactics to recruit victims, as well as their tactics to make money through these online compounds, online cyber scamming compounds. And so it's might seem like, oh, this is not that big of a deal, but we are actually seeing it affect a lot of people, not only in Indonesia, but throughout the world. And so kind of going back to a timeline to build, how did this come to be? We saw some cyber centers starting to pop up in Dubai, and then they started really popping up in Cambodia. There was a zone in Cambodia, I'm not going to be able to say that right, but we're going to give it a try. The Shinakuville Special Economic Zone was established in 2018. This was a zone created between the Cambodian and the Chinese government to create more economic prosperity for the area. It was set up in a strategic location near a port. Their goal was to set up a bunch of industries, provide thousands and thousands of jobs for Cambodians, as well as it allowed China to start building out what they call the Belt and Road Initiative, which was launched in 2013. And this was kind of what China claims as the new Silk Road. This was China's desire to create a road connecting China, Asia, and Africa, and even parts of Europe, to help with the flow of goods and products. And so this was launched, and the SSEZ, or the Special Economic Zone, was supposed to be kind of like a gold standard. It was supposed to be the roadmap and the role model for all these cities coming out on the Belt and Initiative Road. And so the government and the companies there were like all about it. And so they saw a huge growth. And there used to be a population in the area of, I believe, I forget exactly how much, but there used to be a small population of around 40,000 people, I believe, in this area. And within 6-7 years, they saw it jump up to 250,000 people living in this zone. And they saw that 90% of these businesses were being owned by Chinese businessmen or Chinese companies and stuff. And so there's this huge influx of investors. There's this huge influx of workers coming into this area. And with that, we also saw a criminal population grow. We saw criminals coming in where there's money, they kind of follow. We saw luxury resorts and casinos popping up there. They're making money there, they got to spend the money. And so we started seeing criminal enterprises coming into this area. And then in 2019, the Cambodian government said, we're going to make online and in-person gambling illegal. And so they closed down all the casinos, all the online gambling sites that were happening there, or compounds there. And with this, we saw for about a year or so, from 2019 and through COVID, so many Chinese leaving Cambodia. Not just this area, but all of Cambodia. Almost 500,000 Chinese individuals were leaving because that was their business. And they saw there was a crackdown on this, on gambling. And so you see a huge population decline, which left resorts and these compounds that were offices, these luxury places open. You know, no one's using them. There's these open buildings. And this created a vacuum for criminals to come in with illegal gambling businesses, brothels, karaoke bars, and then a lot of the hotels and resorts turned into these online scam compounds. And so these compounds that victims are currently being held at used to be a part of this special economic zone, but because there was a void, it created an opening for criminals to come in. And with that, when we see wealth come into a place, a lot of times wealth allows for corruption to be more okay, yeah? You know, you can pay people off under the table, and it allows for corruption to take place. And when there's corruption in a place, it also allows these criminals to operate with impunity or operate without consequences. And so all of these things were happening in the region that allowed for a perfect storm to take place. Also, something else that was happening kind of in 2021 is we saw the Myanmar government, there was a military coup. I don't know if y'all know about it. It's not as big on the news as we see other wars, but there was a huge military coup going on in Myanmar as well. where the government was divided. They didn't have control over all of Myanmar. And so these things that are happening in geopolitics affects human trafficking. And then it's going to trickle down and affect people throughout the world. And so in 2021, as these cyber scamming compounds were starting to grow, they were being moved from Dubai into Cambodia area. Most of these cyber scamming compounds were run by Chinese gangs and criminals, organizations, and they were originally using Chinese victims coming over through the border. There was a pretty easy way to cross the border. China started getting more stricter on border crossings, and then they needed to find victims from elsewhere. Where else do we find victims? Let's look at other countries. And that's when they started recruiting victims, mainly from Asian countries originally, like Hong Kong, Taiwan. We do see some Indonesians as the original ones coming out, Vietnam also. And so these victims thought they were moving into Cambodia. Yeah, I'm gonna get a job at a legit company. I'm gonna be able to make 15, 20 juta a month. I can send most of that home. I'll work there for a year or two, save up. I can move back home, start my own business, buy a house, get married. Oh yeah, I'm gonna be rich. Kaya Raja, yeah? We're gonna be super rich. It's an easy way. We move abroad. I sacrifice 2-3 years of my life to make money, and then I can come back home. That's what they were thinking. But when they landed in these centers, they were forced to do other things, and they were trapped there. And so in 2022 is when the international world, a lot of NGOs start hearing of cases of other people, non-Chinese citizens, being victims. And so the Taiwanese government reported that they had about 600 cases of Taiwanese individuals, Taiwanese nationals, being trafficked, and they got those cases within June through August of that year. And that's a lot of cases. In Indonesia alone, from 2020, I think it's 2021 to 2023, they had over 3,000 cases reported of cyber scamming victims, of only Indonesians being reported. And so it's a high number. It's a huge number that we're talking about right now. And so for my office, we received our first case in December of 2022 from 3 Indonesians that were trafficked in Myanmar in the Wa state. I'll show you a map of that in a second. And this was the first time that we had a direct contact with victims that were currently in cyber scamming centers. 2 of the victims were from South Jakarta. They were university educated. Another victim was from Bogor, recently married. He had gone abroad to get a job to pay off debt that he had gotten from a wedding and buying a house and all of that. He wanted to pay off that debt, so he figured the best way to do that is work abroad. And when he went abroad, he got trafficked, and these girls got trafficked as well. When I talked with the 2 girls, they had said that they were actually recruited through friends. Some friends that were working in Dubai were recruiting them and say, hey, my company has some openings in Thailand, but ultimately they were rerouted to Myanmar and trafficked there. And so the thing that is really interesting about this crime is it affects not just people from low economics. Yeah, so when we talk about human trafficking, especially in Indonesia, it's typically an economic matter. We typically see a lot of victims that are low educated. TKI, TKW, biasanya mereka nggak lulus SMP, SMA, nggak lulus kuliah, mereka pergi ke negara lain karena nggak bisa dapat kerja benar di sini, jadi mereka pikir lebih mudah pindah, ya. So we see a lot of people like TKI, TKW, ABK, anak buah kapal, they don't have high education status, and so they're more vulnerable, they're more desperate for a job. Mereka pengen kerja, mereka butuh cari kerja. So typically, in the past, we've seen low-income individuals affected by trafficking. However, with this new system at play, this new thing, we're seeing more and more highly educated individuals being trafficked through forced scamming centers. And so sometimes it's individuals who their financial struggles push them to take a job abroad, or maybe they recently graduated college and they think it's really cool to go work abroad and they want to go work abroad for a little bit. It'd be fun, enjoyable experience. We've gotten cases of people from as young as 14 years old to around 40 years old. That's typically what forced cyber scamming is affecting. We've seen citizens that have always been law-abiding. They've always been good citizens, never arrested, get trafficked, but we've also seen individuals that have a criminal background in their past country. They're kind of running away from the police or their background. They're trying to find something new, a new opportunity going out. We've seen people that are physically fit as well as disabled in these scam compounds. We've also seen female and males in these scam compounds. So really, forced cyber scamming is affecting everyone. Some organizations have reported they've serviced people that have even graduated with a PhD. So not just graduated S1, not just S1, not just S2, but even S3, udah lulus S3. And so that's why this is kind of interesting and kind of new, because in all of history, it's mainly been low literacy rate, low economics, but this is affecting anyone and everyone at play. And so this is just a quick map of some of the countries that have been identified as victims. There are more than this, but these are the confirmed identifications that have been reported through another organization. And so right now it's mainly affecting Asian countries, as you can see, but they're getting victims from Africa, they're getting victims from Latin America, as well as even the United States. We've seen some victims come from Turkey. A lot are mainly Asian countries, but it also is shifting too. And so you might be asking, how is it possible for this to happen? And the thing is, we've seen a wide variety of victims throughout these last couple of years as reports have come out from different organizations on the ground. We've seen a wide variety of victim profiles, but they're sharing one common trait. In these cyber scamming centers, they have to be kind of proficient in computers and social media. They're using technology in order to scam other people. And that's pretty common amongst our age. I think, belum ada orang yang gaptek, ya. Masih, if you're in college now, harus tahu gunakan technology, ya. Nggak boleh gaptek if you're going to college anymore. I think if you're Gen Z millennial, you're pretty good at most basic forms of social media and stuff. And so we're seeing so many victims that are educated and tech savvy. There have been reports of people that were recruited to work in IT and they were forced to write code and develop code for these scam centers to improve on their scamming techniques, to improve the websites they're using, the fake investment platforms they're using. And so the perpetrators, the traffickers are smart. They know what they need and they're gonna find it. And so when they're recruiting people, a lot of centers typically want people that are bilingual, multi-language, especially English, but each center is a little different. And so that's where it gets complicated. Each compound has a little bit different flavors. And we've even heard reports of there's some compounds that are 10, 20 stories tall, and each floor does a little bit different cyber scamming. Maybe they're scamming a different area of the world, or they're using a different technique. And so when they're looking to recruit victims, they're kind of trying to get anyone and everyone they can. And so some of the methods that have been reported is we've seen recruitment through legal primary job matching websites. So traffickers are building out these fake business profiles. They're pretending to be these regular companies, and that's how they're using recruitment workers. There was one report that it was one of the trafficking compounds posed as like a gaming company, and they were looking for IT workers to help on their gaming company. We've seen traffickers using and recruiting victims through private job matching groups on social media, on Facebook page. There's these ads of like, oh, work, get 15, 20, 30 juta a month. You only need to speak English. You need to only know basic forms of computer technology. Send in your CV right now, work abroad. Visa will be paid for, ticket will be paid for. People see those ads and they're like, oh, that sounds awesome, that sounds amazing. And they click on those ads. We've also seen people be recruited through personal networks. So like I said, the two girls from Jakarta that we worked with, they were recruited through friends, their friend network. They had a friend that was working in Dubai, most likely at one of the cyber scam compounds. And this friend was also a victim, and she was forced to recruit people. And so we're seeing some of these victims at the scam compounds move to the human resource department, and they're forced to recruit 5 to 10 other friends to become victims as well. And so it does happen through personal networks. So just because a friend reaches out, they're working in Myanmar, Cambodia, don't always trust it. Because they might be forced to be doing that. They don't want to do it. They're not a bad friend. They're just under an exploitative situation. Also, we've seen some traffickers pose as potential clients to professionals, like potential customers. Maybe they try to invite in magicians. Sometimes they're looking to invite people to be like tour guides in Cambodia. They look and they act as a professional person, set up something, come to Cambodia. We need your services here as a magician, a musician, interior designer, a tour guide. We want you to provide services here, and when they get there, they're also forced into the scam compound. And we have seen some small cases of kidnapping of victims on the street. That's not as common, but it does happen. And so where these scam centers are kind of taking place, this is a map of Cambodia. So these are just some pinpoints of reported scam centers from satellite maps. Let's see if this, I don't know if this points, oh no. Sorry. I'm gobtuck with this. So, this is a map. I don't think this has a thing. No laser, boo. But this is a map of Cambodia. These are some of the reported scam centers that are taking place. We've seen some in the economic zone here on the bay, but we've also seen them go up into the mountains as well in the river near the border of Vietnam and Cambodia. One really common is Myanmar. So we're actually seeing a lot more Indonesians being trafficked into Myanmar right now versus Cambodia. Originally it was Cambodia. Now the trend is shifting to Myanmar. There has been some Indonesians trafficked in the Philippines and Thailand and Laos as well. But in Myanmar, so this is the country of Myanmar. Myanmar is currently going through a civil war. There is a military coup going on. So the thing that makes that really tricky, let's get into geopolitics for a little bit, join me on this ride, is when there is a military coup that they have power of certain provinces that the government doesn't have power of. And so some of these scam centers have set up their compounds in these provinces because they know if they're in the province that a military coup is taking place in, there's no law and order. So it's going to be harder for the Myanmar government to come in. It's going to be harder for the diplomatic powers to have an effect. And so that was the case with the girls and the guy that we were working with. They were in the Wa state. So on the left, this is a map of Myanmar, and the photo in the middle, the two green pieces, that's the Wa state. So that's what's currently being taken over. It's a separate kind of government running that area. On the right, the photo on the right is a little bit more zoomed up, and so you can see it's on the border of China as well as Thailand. And these girls and the guy, along with some Indian nationals and Nepali nationals and some other nationals, were in this small cyber scamming center there. They had reached out to us. They had reached out to KBRI in Myanmar. They have reached out to different people for help. KBRI, or the embassy in Myanmar, the Indonesian embassy, was trying to do their best. However, their diplomatic powers are only with the government of Myanmar. At the time, they did not have a diplomatic relationship with the military running this area. And so it was really hard for them to enter because the Myanmar government can't enter. So why do you think the Indonesian government's going to be able to enter and just take these girls and this guy, take these victims from the compound? And so because they were there, we also saw this area had high-tech military gear from China. And so trying to do a recovery and sending in a privatized recovery was also really dangerous. We had talked to some ex-special forces from different countries, and they said it'd be nearly impossible to get out alive. So then you think, okay, why don't they just run? Why don't they just try to jump out a window and run at night? Well, a lot of these scam centers now have what's called a shoot-to-kill order. If the guards see someone running and fleeing, they shoot him to kill him. They don't shoot him to stop him. They don't try to detain him. They just shoot to kill. It's better just to kill the victim, erase the debt, than try to recover them and force them back into it. And so that's the thing is, people that are in these scam centers, they know there's going to be punishment. They know there's a shoot-to-kill order. And so you can't just lari diri. You can't just run away. And so that's what makes it really complicated is, depending what compound these victims end up, kind of determines their fate and how easy it is for them to get out. And then we're also seeing victims. We've had a lot of victims on the Thai and Myanmar border. So this is near the Thai border in Mayawadi. I think I'm saying that right, in Mayawadi. And so there's hundreds of scam centers there that facilitate thousands of victims. in these scam centers where these red dots are, and they're just dotted along the border of Thailand. And so how we're seeing them get in the context of Indonesia, we're seeing Indonesians get recruited, they get flown out to Thailand. Sometimes they have a stopover in Myanmar, and the company just picks them up in Myanmar and says, oh, you won't fly through to Thailand, we'll just actually drive you to the compound. And they're like, okay, that's weird, but okay. Sometimes they get flown into Thailand and taken over the border back into Myanmar through these points of handovers. And all those costs are racked up as debt bondage for them. And so they have a cost of flight tickets, visa tickets, the cost of the boat taking you over or the car taking you into the compound. And they use this debt bondage also to keep victims there. And they say, no, you need to pay off your debt before we'll let you go. They never actually let you go even if you pay, but they use that as well to keep the victims in these compounds. And so here's a couple kind of satellite photos and different photos that have been able to be taken of some of these compounds. These both compounds are based in Cambodia. I lost my satellite photos from Myanmar when I transitioned jobs. But so you see there's a lot of buildings, there's a lot of compounds, and easily you could have 10,000 victims in a compound like this. You could easily have 25,000 victims in a compound like this. It's like a little mini town, a little mini village in these ways. Here on the left is also a picture of a scamming compound. You can kind of see the windows and the balconies are covered and barred off. Typically, there's a lot of CCTV around there and security guards to keep everyone inside. And so typically, when individuals are in these scam compounds, they work there and they also live there. They're not going in and out. They're rarely going in and out unless they are like a special worker. And so kind of the very, very simplified process of how these scam centers work is you have the traffickers or the compound managers threatening these victims to carry out online frauds or online scams. They're forcing the victims to do things. Each compound has a little bit different scam flavors. Each compound does it a little differently. Some compounds are doing romantic scams, some are doing fake cryptocurrency scams, some are doing real estate investment or other type of investment scams. Some compounds are only focusing on America. Some compounds are only focusing on Europe. Some compounds, if they have majority Indonesian-speaking individuals, will focus on Indonesia. You know, they will use the language that they have and help figure out who they want to scam and who they want to focus on. And so these victims are talking directly with the potential scam victims using different recruitment methods. They do have scripts. We've seen some photos come out of like scripts that these trafficking victims use in order to build a relationship, kind of just like you have at a call center. And these victims abroad are being scammed out of their money through different ways. And so some of the things that victims are forced to do when it comes to the different scams is there's a really common one called the pig butchering scam. There's a phrase in Chinese, I don't know how to pronounce it, I'm not gonna pronounce it, but the translation is like to fatten the pig. If you know Chinese, you can tell us later. The translation is to like fatten the pig. And so kind of typically these end up being romantic scams, but they're not always. They build relationships with the scam victim. They're talking with them, they're building them up. They're trying to figure out how much money this person has. They're talking about jobs. A lot of times you do see them try to elicit a romantic scam. They're using kind of like psychological techniques as well. You know, they're creating charming personas. Sometimes we see individuals in this cyber scamming compounds that are acting as models for video calls and stuff like that, but they're creating like a charming persona. There's even some instances of voice messages being exchanged, and the scam victim thinks they're talking to a woman, but because of technology, they're actually talking a man. It's just the voice is being changed with technology. You know, they're trying to say, oh, I'm a hardworking, I'm a loving person. Maybe they develop a whole backstory about how they have a family and stuff. And then they start asking for different favors through customizing stories with the scam victim. Maybe they say, oh, I just been through a harsh divorce. Can you please help me out? Can you transfer me money? Or can you invest in this project I'm working on? Sometimes they'll present themselves as like a highly educated woman, they'll build that romantic relationship, and they'll try to prey on the empathy of the scam victim. And then sometimes they create like a drama in the situation. And so they're creating arguments and drama with these potential scam victims. Sometimes they conduct emotional blackmail through it. Sometimes some romantic scams are where they get nudes or like photos, videos, foto yang terlanjar of the scam victim, and they say, I will send this to people if you don't send me money. So they'll use that blackmail as well. That's actually happened in Indonesia a lot. We've seen a lot of kind of romance scams where people pretend to be someone they're not through different means of technology, and they create a relationship biasanya with emak-emak, ibu-ibu, kurang sayang. But not all the times. We've seen some young ones too in some international schools be scammed. In these ways, the trafficking victim gets a hold of naked photos, naked videos, and says, I will publish this, I will send it to people if you don't transfer me money right now. And because they're emotionally invested, it's the pig butchering scheme. They're fattening up, they're building a relationship with the person, they're making them feel good, and then that's when they come in and perform the scam of transferring money, investing in things. We also see a lot of illegal online gambling platforms being conducted in these scam centers. I know that's a really common practice here. We do see a lot of Indonesians that are engaged in judi online, and it is illegal here, but they find ways to participate in it. And a lot of these judi online sites or these illegal online gambling sites are rigged in the favor of the scam center, not in the favor of you. So they get you trapped in, they get you addicted to it, and then they slowly get your money through that way. We are also seeing some scam centers. They do like fake cryptocurrency scams, invest in this cryptocurrency platform. They'll create a platform that looks legit, but in reality, it's not a cryptocurrency platform. So if you want to invest in cryptocurrency, please do your research, and please know what you're investing in, and please know that it's a safe platform or not. They'll do investment scams, and sometimes and occasionally we do see some of these victims hold other kind of roles in the compound, but it's not as common. Like I said earlier, some of them are acting as models on video chat calls to prospective scamming victims. Some of the girls are forced to work as sex workers in the brothels and the karaokes of the scamming compound, servicing the traffickers and the compound managers and the gangs. And so sex trafficking does happen in some of these compounds. We see some of the security guards are actually victims, and they're forced to guard each floor or the gates of the compound. We also see some of the victims act as agents, and they're there to source goods, whether it's food and basic necessities or luxury goods for the compound managers or the traffickers. And so some of the victims we've worked with, they said that they got in the good graces of the compound manager, and so the compound manager would bring them to help go buy the food for the compound, and they would go to the market and buy it and like accompany the compound manager, but they always stayed in the car and they were always locked in. They just kind of helped in that way. And so not every victim is working on a computer all the time, but majority of the times they're working on a computer. They're forced to scam other individuals. And so when they're forced to scam other individuals, kind of like any other job, they have KPIs, you know? And so they have, it's kind of a morbid KPI, but they have these things they need to reach. They need to get a certain goal. You need to connect with these many people. You need to earn this amount of money. And if you do not reach your goal, they have punishment in these scam compounds. So these are some photos that came out in a report a while back of some different punishments. Here on your left, we see a guy that was buried alive. So only his head is up. They buried him alive because he was underperforming in scams. Down on the bottom right here, this is physical punishment. So we hear a lot of compounds will use physical punishments. You have to do a certain amount of push-ups if you don't reach your goal. They use that as a way to encourage people to reach their goals. Up on the top is a guy, his hands are getting smashed because he didn't follow the rules and he didn't reach his target. We've also had cases of electrocution. So the top right, paling kanan, is a photo of someone being electrocuted. We've had video files of people hearing people being electrocuted. And so every scam compound does their punishment a little different. Just kind of like their frauds and their scamming is different, the punishment is up to the compound manager and what they feel is necessity. And so Some people have been physically abused so bad they've broken legs, they've broken arms, and healthcare there is not the best. And sometimes they end up passing away because of these injuries. There have been a lot of cases of individuals passing away. There have been cases of people so desperate they jump out of windows and they break bones in their body and they get sick or pass away from those injuries before they're recovered. And so these are really common practices. So it's not like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go show up to work. Uh-oh, I didn't reach my goal today. Oh, I'll do better next time. There's consequences there. And occasionally, if you are so underperforming day in, day out, some of these compound centers will sell the victims to other compounds. They say, okay, they're not helping us, they're not good, we're gonna sell them to someone else. And we've seen individuals being sold for 25,000 USD. I can't do the math off the top of my head, but that's a lot of money. And that is added on to the debt bondage that victim has. So a victim, say she's in one compound in Cambodia, gets moved to another compound in Myanmar. They paid $25,000 for her. That's added to her debt. And so the compound owners of the new compound say, oh, well, you have to pay off $25,000 of your debt. You're still in debt to us, so you need to work that much. And she has to work and work and work to reach that debt, but the debt constantly is growing because the scam compound managers will say, oh, well, there's a fee for food. There's a fee for using the computer you're typing on. Oh, there's a fee per day for the floor you're walking on and the air you breathe. There's a fee for the beds and stuff. And so they use this to rack up debt, to help the victims feel like they'll never get out of it, help the victims feel like they're hopeless, that ultimately they break the victims, and the victims eventually are just like, yeah, oodala, okay, I'm here, this is my life, I might as well just get along with it and do the work. Their goal is that they just get victims that are compliant and complacent and stay there and just continue constantly day in, day out, help them scam, help them get more money. And so it's not a happy place to be in. And so when it comes to individuals being identified as trafficking victims, we've had issues with different government agencies because every government has a different identification method when it comes to human trafficking. But when we look at international standards, when we look at different protocols that have been placed amongst different regions, these are kind of some indicators that when we hear stories of forced scamming victims, we can say this is actually human trafficking. Because they have restriction of movement, they're not allowed to leave compounds. There is physical and sexual violence. Victims, like I said, are sold openly between their employers, some of them for sex trafficking, some of them are sold to different compounds. They're using debt bondage, deception is being used. They thought they were gonna go work as an HR or call support, but instead they're scamming people. There's sometimes isolation. If you're acting out, they'll lock you up in a room. They use intimidation and threats, just like we saw earlier with the physical violence and the punishments. A lot of times, there's a withholding of wages and excessive overtime. You've got to work the entire day until you reach your goal, even if that's 24 hours. We also see a lot of these scam centers holding the identification documents of victims' passports, KTPs, those things that they bring. So they land in country, the scam compound says, turn over your phone, turn over your KTP, your passport. Some compounds still allow you to have a phone, which is really nice, but some don't. It kind of, like I said, it depends on who's running the scam compound center. And a lot of times these working situations are abusive, they're inadequate, the living conditions aren't good, they're not clean, they're not sanitary. And so it's affecting a lot of people. These are what victims are having to deal with day in and day out. This is kind of their reality when they're in these scam centers. And they feel, oh, we're never gonna leave. We've reached out to embassies, we've reached out to our family, but they can't really help us. We're in a different country. And so they kind of feel hopeless. And so typically, not every individual gets recovered immediately. It is a long process. Thankfully, we are seeing a shift in the environment now. We're seeing the Indonesian government, the Thai government, Myanmar government step up and help with recovery. I don't know if y'all have seen some news articles lately, but some really awesome news in early February. Kemenlu, Kementerian Luar Negeri, helped reintegrate or repatriate over 500 individuals from Myanmar scam compounds. And they've helped with all these cases, but it takes time, and it's a process. In the end of February, we also saw a shift in the area. We saw more Myanmar government officials stepping up. The Thai officials, especially the Thai government on that border that we talked about, are stepping up. They've come into scam compounds, and they've found thousands and thousands of workers. So there's multiple stories like this, where over 7,000 workers from these scam centers were able to get out. They were able to leave the scam centers and be repatriated. However, it's different for everyone. And so it's not over. Once you get out of the scam center, it's not over. It's a long process of coming home. And so kind of what happens next, depending where you're being trafficked and depending where you're recovered, on the border of Myanmar and Mayapati, we see a lot of victims. They're trafficked in Myanmar, and then when the scam centers are like, yeah, we're done with you, we don't want you anymore, Yahuda, they drop them off across the border. It's a 500-meter walk or a 50-meter walk across the border. They drop them off in Thailand, and they say, okay, it's Thai government time to deal with it. And so these victims, these trafficking victims, have to go through the local processing. In Thailand, it's termed an RM, is like the shorthand that we use, but it's the, oh my gosh, now I'm blanking. It's like the national, it's like that, their identification process. Sorry, I totally forgot what it stands for. But this is how they are able to, they hear the stories of the victims. They see, is this victim a trafficking victim or not? A lot of governments right now are stretched thin. They don't have enough money to provide for the cost of bringing everyone home. And therefore, if they see any hint of you complied or you were complicit with these scams, they will not term you as a trafficking victim. Because if you are not labeled as a trafficking victim within their local processing, they don't have to pay for you. They don't have to cover you, and they can actually process you. And if you overstayed your visa or you entered the country illegally, the local government can charge you a fee for that. They can detain you. They can also charge you and prosecute you as a criminal for doing scamming or illegal activities. And so it gets really, really complicated. It's not as simple of, oh, I went abroad, I got trafficked, I got out, and I got home. It's, I get out of these scam centers, and I have to go through the local process, and kind of depending where I get recovered, depending on good luck and the forces be, depends on how long it takes. And so we've seen thousands of individuals in detention centers for weeks and months on end waiting to come home. We've seen people being held. The 3 Indonesians that we worked with, they were held in detention centers in Myanmar for overstaying their visa. They were there for a couple of days, and thankfully the Indonesian government stepped in and helped get them out of the detention center, and they weren't there for long, but they had to go through that process. They were victims that are now treated as criminals because a lot of governments and a lot of systems don't know how to handle this right now. They're playing catch up with handling this. And then there's a repatriation process. If you get termed as a trafficking victim, the repatriation process typically is a little bit easier, a little bit faster. But if you don't have any money to fly home, you're kind of just waiting. You're waiting to see what's going to happen. And so recently, the Indonesian government chartered a whole flight to bring people home. There are nonprofits that are helping out. Thankfully, there's a local nonprofit here, International Justice Missions Indonesia. They're with the greater organization, IJM, but the Indonesian chapter within 2025 alone have helped repatriate over 600. I believe the official number right now is 662 victims, and that's a lot. It's only been 4 months, guys. It's only been 4 months, and they've already helped 662 Indonesians come back home. And so this process is long. It's tedious, it's taxing, and it's not healthy mentally or physically for these individuals. So these victims of trafficking went through coercion, deception, force, fraud. They were abused. They get out, but then they're stuck in kind of limbo, as we say. They're stuck waiting to see what their future holds. And after they come back, so say they come back into Indonesia, it's still a long recovery journey for them ahead. They have to deal with trauma. Some of the victims I've talked to that have come back from these say they have trauma talking with Chinese Indonesians. It's not y'all's fault that you look similar to Chinese. It's not at all, but that's just the reality. Their traffickers were these Chinese gang members that threaten them day in and day out. And when they see anyone that looks similar to that, they feel scared. their body doesn't know how to react. Their body thinks they're back in that trafficking situation. So they need to go to therapy, they need counseling, they need help to heal from that trauma. They have to figure out how to pick up the pieces. Maybe they still have debt from this whole thing that they have to pay off. They have to find a new job. But that can trigger a lot of trauma as well. And so it's not as simple as, oh, they got out, they're free, now they go back into society. The journey for recovery is really long. The journey for them is a long process ahead. And a lot of it just depends on what support system do they have. Do they have a good family? Are they connected with a good nonprofit to support them? And so I have a really good friend that I used to work with. They're currently on the border of Myanmar and Thailand in Mayapadi, and they're working with the victims that are coming out and helping them get repatriated. And so they've been working with thousands and thousands of individuals that have been coming out of these scam centers. They're seeing them on the back end, and they're helping them in that intermediate term before they're able to go back home. And I asked her, I was like, okay, so I'm talking with a bunch of university students. What would you say to them about this situation? What kind of advice would you give? And she was saying, I think the biggest thing I would share is that recruiters are sophisticated, and for any job that is overseas that offers a really good salary, flights, visas, etc., you really need to look deeper to make sure that it is legit. Because she's heard stories day in and day out of people thought it was a legit job. They thought it was going to be an easy job. They were going to make bank. They were going to make so much money. And they held on to that hope of gaji besar. Mereka lihat, oh, wow, gaji besar, gak harus yang S2, S3 bisa dapat, langsung dapat 15 juta sebulan, 20 juta sebulan. That's luar biasa. No probation period. Oh my gosh. But in reality, these opportunities are turning into trafficking situations. And is it worth it to take a job abroad that seems too good to be true and risk being a trafficking victim? Or is it worth it just taking your time, do your due diligence, ask the questions, check to see if these things are legit, see if it's worth it, ask friends and family, and figure out, is this a legit job offer or is this a potential scam? Is this a potential trafficking situation? And so some things y'all can do to stay safe, both from being trafficked as well as being victim scams, is be wary of any offers that seem too good to be true. That's a very American phrasing. But you know, getting a job right out of college that has a huge salary, that doesn't make sense. You don't need to have a lot of skills, but you're getting paid huge, and you're going to Myanmar, and Myanmar's economy right now is not great. They're going through a war. Why would I be getting paid this much? That's a too good to be true moment. Or if you're talking with someone on WhatsApp or social media and they're trying to scam you, maybe they offer you, oh, invest in this cryptocurrency and in 2 days you'll make 100% fold. Yeah, if you transfer 10 juta now, in a couple weeks or in a couple months, this crypto is doing so well, you'll be able to rake in 100 juta or 1 milyar. That's kind of a little too good to be true. So you need to do your due diligence. You need to ask questions. You need to do your research. And you need to stay vigilant about it. If you don't know, ask for help. Ask your friends to help review something. Ask your family to help. Also, if you are thinking about moving abroad, I'm the last person to say don't do it because I moved abroad for work. And so it is possible to do it safely. You just need to do your research. You need to understand the country you're going to, the visa laws that are in place, the regulations. Is gambling legal or illegal there? Okay, if it's illegal, maybe don't sign a contract and get a job at a gambling company in that country. And so do your research on the country of destination too. You know, do your research. Find the number of the KBRI in the country that you're going to. Take photos of your passport, send it to your friends, your family, let people know what you're planning on doing. Make sure your documents are legit and legal. Sometimes we see these scam centers say, we will take care of your documentation for you, and they do it tidak resmi. They don't do it right, they don't do it properly, and that incurs worse legal issues on the back end too. And just ultimately don't be afraid to ask for help. Whether you do get stuck in a scamming situation and you're the one being scammed, don't be afraid to ask for help. It happens to anyone and everyone, and we're all a little terlalu malu to talk about it. Yeah, we're all a little terlalu tutup untuk berbicara tentang itu, tapi kalian harus berani. Yeah, if you need help because you've got scammed, speak up and talk about it. If you end up in a situation like this, don't be afraid to reach out to people for help, because the more you reach out, the more you ask for help, eventually the pieces will fall in order. And so that's what happened with our case. So going back to the case of the 3 Indonesians that were in Myanmar, they were trafficked there. They were in the WA state. We were talking around with Kemenlu, some of the TNI attaches there, trying to figure out what the best opportunity is to do. And at the point, they didn't have any diplomatic power. But the other victims in the scam center, there was some Nepalis and some Indians, and honestly, I do not know how it happened. I just call it the grace of God, and the luck of God came in and played in that point. But one day we hear the Indian Army had a connection with the police in the area or the military people in the area, and they used their connections and they came in to help recover those girls. And so because all the victims were asking for help, they still had their phones, they still had access to internet, they were speaking out. Through these weird connections, we saw the Indian victims were able to rely on their government to come in and help out, because somehow, I don't know geopolitics in that area enough to explain how that worked out, but by the grace of God, they were able to come out. And they did have the financial resources to come back quicker. But if they didn't have the financial resources to fly back on their own, pay for their flights on their own, pay off the fees of overstaying their permit, instead of maybe a month processing, it could have taken a couple months, 6 months, maybe even a year. It's still uncertain. There's still not clear data on the average length of time per each country. And so I just implore you guys, as some of y'all are probably hampir lulus, you're looking for jobs, you're wanting to get out into the job worlds, be careful when it comes to job opportunities that are coming to you. If you know of friends that say they want to move abroad for a job, they got an offer on social media or for a friend, be a good friend and talk to them, share this information with them, look over the contract, look and do research on the company to see. If y'all want more resources, here are just some quick resources. So Kementerian Luar Negeri, or Kemenlu, has an Instagram account called Peduli WNI, and so they put updates and different tips and helps, not just for working abroad and not being trafficked by cyber scams, but other ways, because there are legit ways to work abroad and do it through BP2MI. There's these programs that the ministries in Indonesia, the government in Indonesia, have set up that are good ways to go abroad. There is an organization that has been established because of this called the Global Anti-Scam Organization. They also post amazing resources. If you're interested in this topic a little bit more, Human Research Consultancy publishes a lot of amazing briefs and papers on this topic of their research. They mainly work with Taiwanese victims and the Thai government and stuff, and so not all the times you hear Indonesian cases, but it's a really great way to stay up to date on what's going on in the region. And like I said, there's an amazing organization called International Justice Missions Indonesia, and they're also really fighting in this world of forced cyber scamming. And so if you need help, or if you have a friend that needs help, you can reach out to them as well, and they can help with the process. They are working directly with Kementerian Luar Negeri. They have direct contacts abroad, and they're a great resource to reach out to. So that's it from me on this topic. I know it's kind of a lot, but hopefully, as you hear, you can sit with it, you can process it, and hopefully this helps each and every one of y'all and your friends and your family avoid being trafficked in the future, avoid being scammed in the future. And also remember, if you come across a victim that has a story like this and they're willing and open to share it with you, show empathy, show kindness, show respect to them, and maybe you can be a helping hand on their journey of recovery as well. So thank you so much. I'm going to close us off in prayer before we transition into the next thing. So mari kita berdoa, ya. Terima kasih Tuhan. I just thank you for today, Lord. I thank you for each and every one of us hearing this today, God. And we just pray over the victims that are currently being trafficked in these scam centers. And we just pray by the grace of God and in your miraculous way, would you create ways and pathways for them to come out. You know, we pray for those that are out of these trafficking situations but waiting in these centers to go home, that you would just move in miraculous ways to allow them to get home fast, allow them to be repatriated fast. And we pray that churches and nonprofits and their community steps up and supports them in this recovery process, because we know that they've gone through a lot of trauma and heavy things, and we just pray that each and every one of the victims coming out of these scam compounds can find freedom, can find hope, and ultimately find hope in you, God. We pray over each student here at Petra University that as they go out into the world and on their journey to find jobs, that you would keep them safe and protected. You would give them wisdom of the Holy Spirit on to take what jobs and whatnot, and you would guide each step of their way moving forward. Would you just bless their days ahead and allow us to have an amazing day? In your name we pray, amen.
Terima kasih kepada Mrs. Rachel Luschen atas materi yang sudah disampaikan dengan jelas. Kiranya materi yang tadi sudah kita dengarkan bisa menjadi berkat dan kekuatan bagi kita semua ya. Ada yang berbeda dari KU minggu depan loh. Kira-kira apa ya? Yap, KU minggu depan akan bertemakan soundtrack What Does Your Mental Life Look Like? Yang akan dibawakan oleh Ibu Evi Santoso, Sarjana Ilmu Komunikasi, Magister Teologi, dan Bapak Sastra Budi Harja, Sarjana Psikologi, Magister Teologi. Di tengah dunia yang berisik dengan tuntutan, ekspektasi, dan tekanan, kita seringkali mengabaikan kehidupan mental sehingga menjadi ruang sunyi yang terabaikan. Dan dari sanalah muncul suara-suara terdalam seperti keraguan, ketakutan, kecemasan, hingga tuduhan-tuduhan untuk diri sendiri yang pada akhirnya melemahkan jiwa. Namun, Injil hadir sebagai suara ilahi yang mengalun lembut untuk memulihkan hati kita yang sudah remuk dan menuntun pikiran kita kepada damai sejahtera. Kita akan membahas bagaimana Injil bisa membentuk dan mengubah suara-suara terdalam menjadi suara ilahi yang penuh dengan pengharapan. Juga, kita akan membahas langkah-langkah praktis untuk menata kembali kehidupan mental kita agar selaras dengan Injil. Yuk, ikut kebaktian Universitas minggu depan untuk mengetahui caranya. Selanjutnya, kita akan mendengarkan pesan rektor. Kepada Pak Rektor atau perwakilannya, waktu dan tempat kami persilakan.
Selamat siang. Shalom Bapak semua. Oke, Ibu Rachel terima kasih. Ya, siang ini kita mengikuti Veritas Lecture. Ya, jadi dalam bentuk yang berbeda seperti yang biasanya. Veritas Lecture kita biasanya belajar tentang isu-isu khusus, ya. Jadi tidak dalam bentuk ibadah kebaktian seperti biasa. Nah, Ibu Bapak dan teman-teman, apalagi akhir-akhir ini Indonesia gelap, kabur aja dulu, ya. Jadi banyak teman-teman kemudian mencari pekerjaan di luar negeri. Tetapi tadi ada beberapa isu yang disampaikan Ibu Rachel, mungkin kita harus hati-hati, gitu aja ya. Hati-hati, lebih cermat, cari informasi yang lebih. Terakhir beberapa tahun lalu juga sempat ada kabar teman-teman yang magang di luar negeri, ya itu kemudian juga dipekerjakan dengan tidak semestinya, bahkan itu juga di negara-negara Eropa, ya. Oke, yang penting hati-hati, ya, lebih cermat, teliti lebih, ya, supaya kita tidak masuk dalam aktivitas perdagangan manusia ini, tetapi juga ketika kita mengetahui, kita tahu, kita bisa menolong juga teman-teman yang mengalami hal seperti itu. Ibu, Bapak, dan teman-teman juga kita doakan yuk, kita undang paling tidak 3 teman untuk hadir dalam ibadah kebaktian kampus minggu depan, didoakan, ya, diundang, kita berbagi, mengundang mereka supaya banyak bisa mendapatkan berkat dari firman Tuhan dan kita bisa bersama-sama beribadah sebagai satu keluarga Petra Nation. Ya. Oke, hari ini tidak ada pengumuman khusus dari saya. Terima kasih Ibu Rachel sekali lagi dan juga teman-teman yang melayani. Tuhan berkati.
Terima kasih banyak Pak Juwantoro atas pesan rektor yang sudah disampaikan. Terima kasih juga Bapak, Ibu, dan teman-teman yang sudah hadir pada Veritas Lecture hari ini. Sampai jumpa di Kebaktian Universitas minggu depan. Tuhan Yesus memberkati.